Smoke poured into the sky as sirens approached. Karen stood at the edge of her yard, waving down the cops like she was directing air traffic. "There's a fire back there," she screamed. But when the officers walked into my backyard and saw the controlled burn pit, and I pulled out the official state research permit, her jaw dropped. She didn't know the fire she tried to shut down was backed by the government. The first thing Karen noticed was the smoke-thin, gray tendrils rising above the hedges that separated our yards. She didn't ask questions. She didn't knock. She didn't even hesitate. She just started filming. It was a warm Saturday morning when it all began. I'd been prepping my backyard for weeks, clearing out dead brush, trimming overgrown branches, and building a proper burn pit, complete with a trench, airflow vents, and a steel ring. It wasn't just to clean up the yard. I'd enrolled in a pilot program run by the state's agricultural department. They were studying biochar, a method of converting organic waste into carbon-rich charcoal used to enrich soil. It cuts carbon emissions and helps rebuild depleted land. It wasn't just legal, it was encouraged. But Karen didn't see science. She saw smoke. And she reacted like she'd caught a wildfire in progress. From across the fence, I heard her yell, "You can't just burn trash in the suburbs. That's illegal." She had one hand on her hip and the other pointed straight at the flames. I walked over calm and told her it was approved by the state, that it was part of an environmental study. She rolled her eyes and laughed. "Sure? You expect me to believe you're some kind of scientist now?" She backed away, still filming. "I've got you on camera." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Everything was by the book. The burn pit sat more than 25 feet from any structure. I had a water hose ready. The material I was burning was all untreated organic brush. Nothing toxic. Nothing dangerous. But Karen had already made up her mind. Within hours, she'd posted to the neighborhood Facebook group, calling me a reckless backyard arsonist. She attached a blurry photo of the smoke, captioned "Fire hazard behind 1487 Ridgeway." Do something. The comments rolled in. Most were confused. A few asked questions. But then a handful of Karen's usual allies jumped in, talking about property values and air quality. One even claimed her dog had a coughing fit after her evening walk, likely from the smoke. That evening, as I sat on the porch reviewing soil readings from the test plot, Karen appeared again. This time, she held a manila folder. She waved it like it was a court summons. "This is a copy of the HOA bylaws," she said. "Section 14 clearly bans any unauthorized fires." I didn't take the folder. I simply said, "It's not unauthorized. I have a permit." From the state. Karen raised her phone again, clearly still recording. "Let's see what the HOA thinks about that," she snapped. The next day, the HOA president, a man I'd spoken to twice in my life, emailed me. The tone was stiff, formal. He said he'd received multiple complaints and asked me to cease all burning activities until a community meeting could be held. I replied with a PDF of my permit, along with a brief summary of the project goals and the state's involvement. I CC'd the department contact. That should have ended it. It didn't. 2 days later, I heard Karen talking loudly on her phone just outside my fence. "If the HOA won't handle it, I will," she said. "I'm calling the police. I'm not letting some backyard scientist ruin the neighborhood." And then, as if on cue, she leaned over the fence and shouted, "Let's see how the cops feel about your little bonfire." I looked at the pit. The fire had long since burned down to glowing coals. A soft breeze carried a faint woody scent through the yard. I picked up a rake and turned the ashes, revealing black powdery bar beneath the surface. It was working. The soil would be richer, more fertile. Karen didn't care. She just wanted me shut down. And in less than 24 hours, I'd find myself standing next to 2 police officers, with Karen watching smugly, while they asked me to explain why I was burning trash in a residential area. What she didn't realize was that the science behind the smoke was stronger than her complaints, and that the next person to visit wouldn't be a cop, it would be a scientist in a lab coat, with credentials she couldn't argue against. The morning after the police visit, my inbox exploded. Karen hadn't just stopped with a phone call. She'd filed a formal complaint to the HOA board, attaching edited clips from her phone recordings, cutting out the part where the officers saw the permit, and conveniently skipping the part where one of them said, "This actually looks pretty controlled." Instead, the video ended right after she shrieked, He's burning trash again, like she was warning of an incoming missile. Neighbors began whispering. Some walked by my property slower than usual, taking glances at the pit like it was a crime scene. A few even started talking to Karen more than normal, gathering on her porch like it was the neighborhood command center. The burn pit sat unused that day. I wasn't planning to fire it up again until the next cycle, but that didn't matter to Karen. She was already escalating. By midweek, a notice appeared taped to my front door. HOA letterhead. Formal language. The type that tries to sound polite while threatening fines. It said I was in violation of community fire safety standards and must immediately cease all unsanctioned outdoor burning. There was no mention of the stay permit. No mention of the agricultural program. Just vague language about neighborhood harmony and shared air quality. I emailed the board again, this time including direct links to the state's website, a scanned copy of my approval, and contact info for the regional supervisor. The reply I got was short. Thank you for the information. We will review. Review. That's all they said. Meanwhile, I kept logging data for the project. The pit was performing well. The first batch of biochar had already been mixed into the raised beds I built on the west side of the yard. I noticed the composted areas were retaining moisture longer, and the soil temperature was stabilizing. The state team I was working with was excited. They planned a midsummer inspection to photograph the progress for their pilot study. But before they could arrive, Karen made her next move. One afternoon, I heard her in the alley behind our homes. She was talking to someone I couldn't see. At first, I thought it was another neighbor, but then I caught sight of a man in a blue shirt holding a clipboard. Karen's voice carried over the fence, smug and sharp. I told him it was dangerous. I told him it's just a matter of time before someone gets sick. The man nodded and jotted something down. I stepped outside, walked toward the fence, and called over. Can I help you? Karen didn't answer. The man turned and gave a polite nod. Just following up on a neighborhood concern. That concern is about a state-approved environmental project. I said, not moving from the walkway. I have a permit, full documentation, and it's part of a monitored program. Karen rolled her eyes. He thinks burning leaves makes him a scientist. I didn't engage. I just pointed to the side gate. I'm happy to let you take a look, as long as you sign the visitor log for the project. Everything's being documented. The man looked surprised. I handed him the clipboard and watched his eyes scan the label, State Environmental Research Participation Log. He signed, stepped into the yard, and walked around the pit. His posture shifted. He started asking smart questions about the airflow control, ash content, the depth of the trench. I showed him the carbonization record sheets. He nodded slowly, impressed. Karen watched the entire thing from behind the fence, her arms crossed so tight they were practically part of her body. After a full inspection, the man said quietly, "Looks like you've done your homework. Honestly, this is one of the better setups I've seen." Then, more loudly, so Karen could hear, "Thanks for cooperating. I'll close this one out." He left. She didn't say a word. But later that night, the rumble started. From my living room, I heard the low hum of engines idling. When I peeked out the front window, I saw them, two police SUVs parked at the edge of the street. Karen stood next to one, animated, pointing toward my backyard. I stepped outside just as two officers approached. "Sir," one said, "we've received a report of an unauthorized fire pit on the premises." My hands stayed calm on my sides. There's no fire burning. And the pit is fully authorized. Karen, not content to watch from afar, stormed forward. "You're going to let him keep doing this? There's still ash in the air. My allergies are acting up. This is unacceptable." The officers looked from her to me, then to the backyard. I nodded toward the side gate. "You're welcome to take a look." One officer raised an eyebrow. "Do you have documentation?" I didn't speak. I walked to the patio table, picked up a plastic folder, and handed them a printout, official state letterhead, seal, my name, project number, and permit. The younger officer flipped through it silently. Karen was practically vibrating beside him. "That can't be real. It's from the internet or something." I reached for my phone. "If you'd like, I can call the program director." "She's happy to confirm." "Go ahead," the officer said. I dialed. The line rang once, twice, then picked up. A clear voice answered, "This is Dr. Maddox, Soil Recovery Division." I turned on speakerphone. "This is regarding the biochar project in Ridgeway Heights," I said. We've had some enforcement questions. There was a pause, and then, we're aware of the property. That's an approved research site. Do they need verification in writing? Karen's eyes narrowed. Her face flushed red. The officer blinked. No, ma'am. That should be sufficient. But Karen wasn't finished. She stepped back, arms flailing. You don't understand. He's burning things in a residential area. Who cares if it's legal? It's wrong. What she didn't realize was that the next visit wouldn't come from cops. It would come from someone she couldn't argue with. Someone wearing a lab coat and carrying a signed declaration from the state. By the next morning, word had spread. Not just about the police visit, but about the phone call. Karen must have realized she lost control of the situation when Dr. Maddox's voice came through that speakerphone. But instead of backing off, she doubled down. She wasn't just calling me a danger now, she was calling the science itself a scam. The HOA message board lit up again. Karen posted a long, angry update titled, "When Rules Don't Matter Anymore." She accused me of weaponizing loopholes, said I was hiding behind fake permits, and even claimed my project was part of a quiet conspiracy to turn the neighborhood into an experimental test site. It would have been funny if half the board didn't start asking questions like maybe she was right. That afternoon, I caught a few neighbors clustered near Karen's driveway, peeking toward my property as if expecting the ground to open up and swallow it whole. I knew things were reaching a boiling point when someone from the HOA hand-delivered a letter stating they were holding an emergency meeting about safety concerns related to backyard activities. Not even 2 days had passed since the police verified my permit, and now they were calling a hearing like I was running an unlicensed landfill. I stayed calm. I documented everything. Emails, timestamps, video from my security cam. I reached out to Dr. Maddox again, this time asking for a written statement of support. She replied within the hour, attaching a formal letter with an official state seal and her signature. It outlined the purpose of the project, confirmed it was sanctioned and safe, and made it clear that any interference would be escalated to her office. I printed 10 copies. Still, something told me Karen wasn't finished. I was right. The next morning, I woke up to loud voices outside. 2 marked city vehicles were parked in front of my house, engines idling. One man in a reflective vest was walking my fence line, jotting things down. Another was holding a tablet and taking photos of the burned pit from the sidewalk. I stepped out calmly, documents in hand. "Can I help you?" The man looked up from his notes. "We received a complaint from a resident about unauthorized environmental activity." "Biochar research," I replied. "State approved. Would you like to see the permit?" Before he could answer, Karen's voice cut through the air like a fire alarm. "Don't believe him," she yelled from her front porch. "He made that up. That's not real science. He's burning trash." The man didn't even flinch. He took the papers from me, scanned them quietly, then turned back to his coworker. "Looks legit. This matches what we saw last month on the university pilot list." Karen stomped down her porch stairs, pointing. "But it's affecting the neighborhood. People are breathing that stuff in. It's got toxins." The inspector took a measured breath, clearly tired of the scene. "Ma'am, the carbonization process in biochar actually removes most of the harmful gases. The smoke you're seeing is water vapor and light organic compounds. This pit's been documented and cleared by the state." Karen stared at him like he just spoke in another language. "I don't care what you say. That smoke is dangerous. I can feel it. My throat is sore right now." He raised an eyebrow. "So you're claiming medical symptoms from standing near a covered burn pit?" She opened her mouth but hesitated. "I'm just saying this is a quiet neighborhood, and we don't need backyard scientists pretending they know better." That's when the man said something that finally quieted her. "We've scheduled a site validation visit with a state specialist. If you have further concerns, you can take them up with her. She'll be arriving Friday morning." Her eyes flickered. "Of who?" He handed her a card. "Dr. Maddox. Soil Recovery Division." And just like that, Karen stopped speaking. By the time the inspectors left, I could see her pacing behind her window. The same confidence she showed at the beginning of all this was gone. There was no HOA rule she could waive, no fire truck she could summon, no neighbor she could rally against a state scientist in a lab coat. And I was ready for it. I mowed the yard, cleaned the pit, organized the documentation. Friday morning couldn't come fast enough. What Karen didn't know, what she was about to find out, was that this project wasn't just legal. It was valuable, recognized, respected. The person showing up next wasn't going to listen to rants or rumors. She was coming to educate. And the moment Karen realized that, everything would change. Friday arrived like a silent storm. The morning light broke through a clear sky, and for once, there was no smoke. The pit was dormant. The ash had cooled. Everything was still. I stood by the back gate, watching the corner of the street, waiting. At exactly 10:03 a.m., a white hybrid sedan rolled into the neighborhood. It didn't look official. No sirens, no markings, just a government plate and quiet confidence. From the driver's side stepped a tall woman in a crisp lab coat, clipboard in hand, a badge from the State Department of Agricultural Sciences clipped to her belt. Dr. Lena Maddox. She moved with purpose. Professional. Calm. Not someone who'd be shaken by neighborhood drama. She spotted me, smiled politely, and walked straight toward the backyard. I opened the gate. Karen, who had been lurking by her window all morning, burst out the front door like it was a fire drill. "You're with the state?" she called out, marching down her driveway. Good. I've been waiting for someone to shut this down. Dr. Maddox didn't look at her. She just stepped into my yard and said, "Let's get started." We walked the perimeter of the burn pit. I showed her the trench depth, the carbon residue, the soil mix beds. She asked technical questions, efficient airflow ratios, surface area coverage, biochar pH levels. I answered every one. This was the work I'd poured my time into. This was my defense. Karen didn't wait long. She pushed open the side gate, ignoring the no trespassing sign, and stormed into the yard. "I want to see what you're doing," she said sharply, her phone already filming again. "Because this whole thing has been a public hazard, and the HOA has had enough." Dr. Maddox finally turned to her. "Ma'am, are you affiliated with the property?" Karen held her ground. "I'm his neighbor. I've filed multiple complaints. That smoke has affected my health and other residents' peace of mind. I want to know how this was ever approved." The doctor gave her a flat look. "This project was reviewed and cleared by our department through proper application channels. It's part of a controlled statewide study on soil revitalization using carbon-negative biochar." Karen scoffed. "You think burning garbage in the suburbs is safe?" "It's not garbage," Dr. Maddox replied. "It's untreated organic material, branches, leaves, garden cuttings, processed under low oxygen. The result is a substance that stores carbon in the soil, improves fertility, and reduces runoff. This backyard is operating safer than some university labs I've seen." I said nothing. I didn't need to. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. Dr. Maddox stepped closer. Calm, professional, unwavering. "Would you like to see the data?" she asked. Karen blinked. "What?" The doctor held out her clipboard. Graphs. Tables. Before and after soil comparisons. We've measured a 42% increase in nutrient retention, and the runoff chemical load has dropped significantly since this project started. Not to mention, it's carbon sequestering. Karen stared at the charts like they were in another language. "This isn't just permitted," Dr. Maddox said gently. "It's celebrated. If you have concerns, I recommend attending the next state AG board meeting. But interfering with a sanctioned test site carries penalties." Karen's eyes flickered. "Penalties? If this were an unapproved disruption, you'd be looking at citations," the doctor said calmly. "But since we documented your actions and no harm came to the research, we'll let this serve as a warning." Karen stood frozen. Her phone lowered slightly. Dr. Maddox turned to me again. "Your reporting has been excellent. We'll be including this site in the spring public outreach materials. If you're willing, I'd like to feature you in the next field report video." I nodded, barely holding back the satisfaction. "Happy to." She smiled. "You've done more than follow the rules. You've helped prove this works." Then she handed me an embossed certificate, signed and dated, Certified Environmental Soil Research Site, Biochar Pilot Program. Karen's jaw dropped. "This is real," she muttered, voice cracking. The doctor glanced at her one last time. "Very real." Karen left without another word. I watched her walk back to her house, slower than usual, shoulders sunken. For the first time since all of this began, she looked uncertain. Not furious. Not self-righteous. Just small. As Dr. Maddox pulled away, I looked down at the certificate in my hand. Weeks of tension, noise, accusations, all answered with quiet truth and official seal. But the story wasn't over yet. Because after all the yelling, all the HOA letters, and all the late-night patrols, something surprising happened. Karen knocked on my door. And what she said next wasn't what I expected. It was quiet when the knock came. No HOA letter. No police. Just a soft tap on the door that stopped me mid-sentence as I was drafting an update for the research group. I wiped my hands, stood up, and opened it. Karen stood there, alone. No clipboard. No phone. Just her, holding a folded piece of paper and looking like she'd aged a year in a week. I didn't speak. I waited. She cleared her throat, but her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. I wanted to apologize. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. She looked away quickly. You were right. About everything. She held out the paper. It was a printed letter. Short, formal. Her resignation from the HOA board. I made it personal, she said, forcing a weak smile. Thought I was protecting the neighborhood, but really, I was just loud. I didn't even try to understand what you were doing. I took the letter and scanned it. Her name signed at the bottom, sharp and sure. I thought you'd be smug about it, she said, glancing up. But I guess you don't need to be. You already won. I wasn't trying to win, I said. I was trying to breathe without being accused of destroying the block. She laughed once dryly. Yeah, I deserve that. There was a pause, long and uncomfortable. Then, unexpectedly, she said something I didn't expect from her at all. You know the raised flower beds in my yard? The ones near the fence. I nodded. They've been dead for 3 years. I've tried everything. Store-bought compost, new soil, even that overpriced organic stuff. Nothing takes. She scratched the back of her neck. You think that a biochar thing would help? That moment right there, that was the real victory. Not the permit. Not the certificate. Not even the public correction from a state scientist. It was watching someone who'd fought me tooth and nail finally admit they didn't know everything. I didn't gloat. I didn't tease. I just nodded. Yeah, I said. It could help a lot. She nodded slowly, still uncomfortable. If you ever want to show me how it works, I'd like to learn. Maybe I was wrong about more than I thought. For the first time in weeks, there was no tension in the air. Just sunlight, soft breeze, and quiet understanding. She turned and walked back home, slower this time, not in shame, but with thought. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Not just with Karen. The neighbors who had once whispered from sidewalks began stopping by to ask questions. Some brought clippings from their own yards, curious about the soil. One even asked if I could help them build a small pit of their own. And Karen, she didn't rejoin the board. But one afternoon, she brought over a tray of cookies and stayed to watch while I layered the next batch of yard waste into the pit. She asked about temperature thresholds, carbon rings, how long to burn before sealing. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something better than hostility. It was progress. A month later, Dr. Maddox returned to film a short video interview for the state program. I stood by the pit in my backyard, answering questions about soil chemistry, carbon sequestration, and suburban skepticism. At the end, she asked one final thing. If there's one thing you wish more people understood about this project, what would it be? I looked into the camera and said, that science doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be honest. Even in a quiet neighborhood, truth will eventually rise through the smoke. The footage aired during the state's Earth Week campaign. Views climbed. Comments rolled in. I wasn't just a suburban resident anymore. I was part of a statewide conversation about sustainability. But even more than that, I had a peaceful yard, cleaner soil, and a neighbor who now nodded instead of glared. That was the real win. Not the recognition. Not the certification. But turning fire into growth. And turning conflict into curiosity.